We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. Hey, BraveCo man, welcome back to the BraveCo podcast. This week, we're doing part 2 with my great friend, Chris Lamm. And last week, just to do a small recap, Chris dove deep into his past, into his childhood, into addiction and overcoming addiction, this incredible God encounter that he had had. But also, you talked a lot about the trials that you faced with cancer and battling cancer and overcoming that. And so, man, your story is so inspirational. Even just coming out of addiction and working through that with fathers in your life or men in your life, coming to a place of real wholeness. But this week, we're going to dive into your success. So your financial success, especially. And there's a lot of guys, Chris, that, I mean, me included, that didn't grow up in a home where we talked about finances a lot. So I grew up in a home where my dad was a businessman, and a great businessman. But I didn't learn a bunch about finances and how to steward finances. I learned a lot about God and a lot about how to steward my relationship with God and a lot about emotional health and a lot about church. And so I've been on a journey for the last probably really like 4 years of going, okay, at some point in my life, I have to build financial wealth, and not just spiritual wealth or emotional wealth, which is great, but I need to build financial wealth. And so I really want to dive into that this week and give guys some real practical tips on where to start and how to avoid some of the pitfalls and all that stuff. So before we do that though, just take me through a little bit, like, how did you become financially successful? When did you get to a place where you're like, I understand the game. I know what I'm doing?
Yeah, well, I think for me, it started early in my career when I started the mortgage business. And remember, it wasn't like I chose it. It was just something I kind of fell into. I got into the mortgage business in 2001, and around 2007 and 8, right before the crash, what eventually became the Great Recession from all the bad mortgages and foreclosures.
Yeah.
I had some people that were around me who basically made a lot of bad decisions. And I would say a lot of society at that time were taking out bad loans and leveraging debt and buying things that they couldn't normally afford. If these weird loans where you could finance 100% of the house with no income didn't exist. So there was this bubble that was getting created that most people probably remember or at least heard about. And I saw so many people during the crash lose everything.
Wow.
Their homes. A lot of them lost their marriages, and some of them even went to prison because their identity was in how they looked and their money. And so I had this really bad example at an early age before I had money. And I'm glad that I didn't.
So wait, were you in the mortgage industry when that happened in 2008?
Yes. Yeah, I was. I was in the mortgage business from 2001 till current. So I had a front row seat to 2008. I was in processing. I was younger, so I wasn't a loan officer yet.
Okay.
But I was in the space, and I had all these colleagues and people that I knew all over the country. And I just seen the lifestyle adjust with their income. And the way that economies always work is they go up and then they always usually contract, and which is why living below your means is such a smart thing, because you can weather all economies. So seeing these examples of people losing everything and identifying with it and buying fancy cars and stuff, I really learned what not to do. That was the beginning for me, is what not to do. My mom, she did a great job with us, but we didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. She certainly wasn't, I would say, someone who knew how to steward finances super well.
Yeah.
We had a foreclosure and a bankruptcy that we remember when we were growing up. So there was all these negative emotions around the mismanagement. So fear was the first part of this journey for me. I was afraid of going through that. Well, I had switched companies at some time around 2008, and I had worked for a couple guys who they had a completely different story. These were guys who lived way below their means, who had a high income, but they were taking their money and they were making investments with it. So if they only needed X amount to live on, whatever they had left, they were constantly buying rental properties, buying manufactured homes across the nation that were refurbished and having them shipped over here and put on little lots and flipping properties and developing real estate. And I just saw the lifestyle. These guys had better marriages. They were more engaged with their family. They did not care what people thought. They bought used cars, discounted clothes, but these were the guys that actually had money.
Yeah.
And so it was really for me the exposure to those opposites that helped me at a young age decide, like, this is probably the right way to do it and this is the wrong way to do it. And some of those guys brought me in and kind of mentored me and taught me very simple things like balancing checkbooks and doing a P&L and a personal family budget. And so that was kind of the start for me.
That's wild.
Yeah.
How did you know, like when did you get to a point where you're like, financially, I don't have to worry about anything any other time. Like, I have made it financially.
I don't actually think that today, because one of the things that people, not everyone, but people realize when they start accumulating wealth is at some point you realize it's not about the money. And I think that people that can take wealth to the next level and they start focusing on other people's money and they have to find things that are more motivating, because having money and buying nice things, it isn't actually very motivating. And so I would say that I felt the pressure, I felt less pressure when I got debt free.
Okay.
So at some point in that time frame, I had gotten out of debt and I had some money saved. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever had 6 months of reserves. And this was actually, honestly, this would probably been a little bit before all that happened, because I started changing my finances early in my career because of seeing how people were living. But I do believe that a lot of people that carry debt, they don't actually know the burden that it has because they've never known anything else. Mm-hmm. A lot of times our parents had debt and we see the stress that it puts on our parents and our household, and having to move all the time because we're getting evicted or you're getting a foreclosure. And then, in high school, the first thing they tell you to do is go get a bunch of student loans.
Right.
No one's teaching you money management and stewardship in high school. And so I think that most people have lived with debt, from the start, and they don't know what it's like to not have debt. So I do remember that was a moment for me where I felt some freedom, that if I lose my job today, I don't have to worry about moving next month.
Right.
I have some breathing room. Like, I can kind of take a step back and reevaluate life. And for me, that was probably step one.
Yeah.
I think that once I started getting rental properties and I started building up an investment account and I started understanding compound interest, and I realized that I have not just 6 months, but 5 years of runway now, that was a pretty powerful thing. But for me, the drive for working and doing what I'm doing, at some point it wasn't really about that. And it was more about just wanting to win, wanting to build something, and then, wanting to help the people that were helping me along the way, because they, someone that owns a business, a lot of times a business owner is getting the majority of the profits of the company. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
They put their blood, sweat, and tears into it. They built it. They put themselves at risk, while oftentimes the people that work for the business, they're making a lot less. And so I'm in a group of guys now that we really try to have a culture where when your team retires you learn to retire them.
Mm.
And so, today I still have pressure, but it's a different type of pressure. Like, I don't have to work anymore. And if I didn't want to, I could change my life up a little bit and not work another day, but I wouldn't want that life.
Yeah. Yeah, I you wouldn't last very long in that life.
I wouldn't, man.
No.
I would not.
It'd be like taking your dog and putting him in the back seat of your car for a long time. He would eat everything inside of it.
I don't know what I would do, man.
Yeah.
I would. Yeah. So
no, that's cool. So, okay, step one. What's step one for guys? Again, like, I think when it comes to money, most people don't even know where to start. And so is there like a simple step one that you take guys through? Like, hey, here's where to start.
I think that step one is you have to identify the belief systems you have around money. Because just like anything, if I love Dave Ramsey and I think he's helped a lot of people, but some of those programs, they deal with the behavior and they don't get to the root. And just like someone that goes on a diet for a year but they never actually have sustainable health for long periods of time, it's because they're never getting to the root and they're not dealing with they don't have a big enough why. They have belief systems. So I think for most people, it's really understanding, like, having a vision for what you want in your life. What do you want your life to look like? Like, do you want to be in a position where you have to stay at your job? Because if you lose your job, you may not pay your mortgage and be able to put food on the table. Or do you have dreams in your life where you would like to start a business and there's no way you could do that today because you don't have the capital and you're living paycheck to paycheck? Whatever it is, maybe it's material things. It's a house, it's a car, it's the trip that you never got to go on. But I think the first thing that guys have to do is create a compelling vision for what they would like their life to look like if money was not an issue, because that's the thing that's going to give them the drive to change their behavior.
One of the challenges, so I'm going to push on that a little bit.
Please do.
One of the challenges is I see a lot of people get into the mode where they want a lot of things, but they don't know what to do to get to that step. And I agree with you. Like, you have to be able to know where you're going, or at least envision what you want.
Sure.
But then what do we do from there?
Yeah.
Like that's part of the, like I always say in counseling, for instance, and I like this perspective. Like, I almost always look through life through the lens of a counselor. Like, when I have a married couple sitting in front of me, I'm always thinking, when they're going to go home, right? They're going to go home out of my office. And if they don't know what to do when their feet hit the ground in the morning, they're just going to go right back to what they've always done. Like, what's the first step? Okay, if a guy has a vision, if he goes, man, my vision is to own my own home, own my own cars, debt free, and whatever, have 100 grand in the bank.
Yeah.
What's his next step?
Yeah. Well, that was, that's just a part of the process in the beginning.
Yep.
And then from there, what you have to do is you have to find people who have what you want and can show you how to do it. And that's a tricky thing to do right now because I don't know what the statistic is, but I was talking to a guy yesterday on a Zoom call, and a ton of people right now that are on social media that are showing Lamborghinis and airplanes and telling you how to make money don't actually have any. And a lot of people...
Shock.
I know. Yeah.
Like it's fake.
It's all fake. The only money they're making is the money that you're going to pay them to buy their course on how to make money. And the other thing is, a lot of us are influenced by people who give us, their intentions are good, but they aren't qualified to tell you how to make money and how to save money, how to invest money, because they haven't actually done it themselves. So I think that is probably the first step, is you have to try and find people that can show you the path. And they're out there. And a lot of times they're right around you, and you just have to ask them if they will help you. And even if they don't know everything, if they're further ahead of you, they can take you where they're at. And that's really the journey for most people, is they got to find those people, and then they got to get vulnerable. Hey, I'm trying to change my finances. Like, I'm on a text thread with a bunch of our friends, and someone yesterday put a text out there and said, does anyone know a good personal family budget to use? And I sent him an email and sent him a video and kind of showed him how to use it. But, those are the questions you have to ask, is how do I do a budget? How do I save money? How do I get out of debt? What's the best strategy? Dave Ramsey's program is not a bad thing. There are programs out there that can get you to a point where you're at least out of debt and you have some basic financial tools of how to manage your money and live on a budget. And the budget's not about restricting your life. It's about helping you get to the point where you can have the things you really want. So I think mentors and teachers that are qualified is step one.
Yeah, that's really good. I know for me, one of the things that I've had to confront over the past probably 3 years, really, and more intensely the last year and a half, is the way that I see money. So for the past probably 3 years, I've felt a ton of pressure to make money, honestly, because let's be real, on a pastoral salary, like I can't retire. I don't even think I have a 401k. Maybe I have a 401k. I don't have a retirement for reals. Like if I've been 19 years at Bethel Church, almost 20 years tomorrow, and a lot of jobs, right? Like if I was a cop for 20 years or military for 20 years,
you'd be retirable.
It wouldn't be like a glamorous life, but I could retire and live off of that. At the church, no way. Like I could probably get free prayer for the rest of my life, which would be awesome. But I started to, and we've had this conversation, I started to realize like, okay, listen, if I don't have a plan for how to grow my financial, whatever, portfolio, wealth, I'm going to end up 65 years old, having to preach, having to minister, having to do all this stuff to make it.
Yeah.
And that's not a fun place to be. I don't want to have to work.
Yeah.
I want to work because I want to work.
Yep.
And then I always grew up with this idea, which is true, that I don't do things for money. And it was a core value that my dad gave me, which I love because honestly, it's part of what's kept my ministry really pure.
Yeah.
Is I can't be bought. I've done so much stuff for people that have lots of money, counseled lots of millionaires, multimillionaires, counseled billionaires, their sons. And for the longest time, I won't take anything from them because, which I think was right. I mean, if someone feels like they can buy you, they feel like they feel like they're doing you a favor.
Yep.
And in the line of work that I'm in, like, I don't want anybody to feel like they're doing me a favor, and I don't want to help somebody with this ulterior motive to get something out of it.
Yeah. Or hold back because you're afraid to upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
Yeah. That wouldn't be good.
Yeah. And what I do, I'm just famous for being honest, blunt. Here's the truth, treating everybody the same. Okay. So kind of with that mindset, the flip side started to happen where I'm realizing like, oh shoot, if I don't change the way that I interact and come up with a better strategy, or not even a better strategy, come up with a strategy to start building wealth, don't do it for money, but make money at it, then I'm going to do what I watched a whole bunch of other people in my line of work do forever.
Yep.
And so I think when you started talking about confront the way that you see money, for me, I go back to like, okay, forever I've looked at, I got to save, I got to cut. But then you start thinking like, dude, no, let's be honest. Nobody gets rich by saving money.
Right.
And nobody gets, like, you can only cut so much stuff out of your budget before you're like, I'm anemic.
Yeah.
Like I can't freaking buy anything. And it gets to this place, like, I'll just be really honest. So it is the BraveCo podcast. Like we get offered lots of free trips. I get offered lots of free, hey, come out here and hunt over here. Come do this thing. I can't take the trips because I can't pay for the tags.
Yeah.
Like I can't pay for a free trip, the $300 to buy my deer license so it just gets to this point where it's like, God dang, man. Not where I feel sorry for myself,
right?
But it's like, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be held under this, like, I don't got an extra
limitation.
I don't got an extra $300.
You're probably going to have a lot want people buying your tags now.
Yeah, no. I cut cheese out of my budget last week. I cut cheddar cheese out of my budget, and now I'm telling my wife like, "Hey, I want to go to this Alaska hunt, or I want to go." She's like, "Yeah, we get $20 a week to spend. Like that's a pastor's salary.
Yeah,
you get $20 to spend on whatever you, babe. Spend it wherever you want. As inflation rises, you know what I mean? I'm like, dang." I can't even buy that candy bar anymore, you know? Like, it's too much. It's not that bad, but it's bad, you know?
Yeah.
It is bad. And so I would like to dive in maybe just a little bit more on how to make a switch, doesn't matter who you are, how to make a switch into, okay, what are the different things that people can do to start to either build wealth, or is it really sit down and come up with a financial plan? Is it like maybe give some more direction? And I can continue to unpack like what I started to do. I mean, for me, maybe I'll do that first. For me, I pulled my dad in right away and my mom in right away, and because they're good at finances. And I like having people in my life who are better than me at an area. It was exposing, you know, I felt like a little kid. I got my dad and my mom in my living room, and they're like, let's go over your budget. And my mom's real thorough.
Yep.
And my dad's super blunt. But dude, even they looked at it and they're like, you can only squeeze a turnip so much, you know? And so they started to go like, hey, what's a couple ways that you could make ends meet? Right. So I was like, I don't know, $1,000 short. And we had sold our house, and Laura and I had sold a house, and we had some capital from that we'd been living on for a while. But it gets down to like, shoot, man, we're scraping the bottom of this barrel.
Yep.
So my dad, just by looking at it from another angle, my dad goes, hey, what's a way that you can close this $1,000 a month gap? Let's just start there. And I was like, oh, I can do something I've never done before. I can open up 2 counseling slots that I actually charge for. I've never done that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I just I did 2 spots a week in complete, okay, now I don't have to worry about, am I bleeding money out? And then Lauren and I sat down and started thinking through like, okay, what do we love to do already that people will pay us for? And so we'd already wanted to go down the journey of doing some courses and some coaching, some classes. So we did some of those and but for us, we've started to think in that direction of like, what do you love to do better than most people that you know, that people are willing to pay you for?
Yeah.
And you're not just doing it for the money, but you're doing it because it's already in your lane and you love to do.
Yeah.
And so we started to go down that road, and that's been helping a ton for us. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, you're on the path. I mean, I think you described it really well. The first thing is you plug the holes and you try to get a really tight budget. But that, like you said, that's only going to get you so far. And the second thing that most people have to do is they have to raise their skill set, or they have to find a way to increase their income.
That's good.
Because you can't invest money you don't have, right? So I think that where you're at is it really is a perfect place to be, because once you start having disposable income, then, and you're already used to living on a budget, right? What most people fail to do is keep their expenses low. When they get extra money, they start adjusting their lifestyle. And to a degree, especially when you're living on a really tight budget, that's okay. You do need to enjoy your life, but you really want to try to capture that extra income and find solid long-term investment strategies that are safe, that aren't, get rich quick schemes, cryptocurrencies, although I have a little, and I'm not saying bad things about that, but a really solid plan that's proven from people that know what they're talking about.
Do you have a couple examples of that?
Yeah. I mean, for example, the S&P 500 is an index fund. And so it's 500 of the best corporations in America. And if you invest money in there, you're investing over all of them. So it's got Coca-Cola, Tesla got added. It might have gotten taken out. Elon keeps getting himself into trouble, but it's got the best companies in America that are profitable, that, are either products or, theme parks like Disneyland that have been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. And you're not just buying into one company or one stock, you're buying into 500.
So instead of putting your money in the bank where it doesn't make anything, you can put it in the
Correct.
S&P 500.
Yes. And over the last, I might get these numbers wrong and someone will correct me, but I believe over the last, 30 years, I mean, it's been an 8 to a 10% return, which is far better than inflation except for a few months over the last year. But the thing is, it's not just about the 8 to 10%. It's about compound interest.
Okay.
And what that means is if you start investing your money and you dollar cost average every month without thinking about it, you put money into this investment account on the same day of the month, every month, in 10 years, because of the way that compound interest works, your money will literally double.
Wow.
Because you start getting interest on interest, which is how credit card companies make their money, interest on interest, right? And so every investment strategy that works best over a 20 to 30 year time period. And that right there is, I think, the first thing that people need to understand is it's a long game. It's a long game. And I think that's one of the things that keeps people from getting into investing, besides not understanding it and a lack of knowledge, which we're going to talk about. It's also that they think that this is something that's going to change in a very short period of time. And that's just not how it works.
Well, I think one of the tough things right now with social media, and we harp on social media a lot, but it needs to be, is there is this real, one, misconception, and two, desire to get rich really quick. Yep. I'm watching that a lot. Like a lot of people my kids' age especially are trying to figure out, like, in a year, how do I get rich in a year?
Yeah.
Like how do I, when I say rich, how do I make $1 million in a year? A lot of young people are heading down that route. And man, if you put that same effort and energy into going, okay, how do I set myself up for success in 10 years? Let's start with 10 years. Yeah. How do I get to a place where 10 years from now, my money is making money for me? Yeah. And I'm making money while I sleep.
Yep.
Seems like that's got to be the target.
10 years is a great place to start, because if someone can commit to something for 10 years, the next 20 will not be a problem, because they're going to learn so many things along that process. And by the time they get to 10 years, like, they're totally a believer, and I think that, even David and I had talked about it. It's about hitting base hits, not trying to hit home runs. And every now and then in the journey of wealth creation, you're going to get a home run, but you stop looking for them because that's a loser's errand. Like, I think I told this story to some people. A guy in my coaching group made $7 million on one trade 2 years ago, and we're on a call. And my coach, who has $103 million right now, and when I met him 15 years ago, he had $5 million. So through his investing in compound interest, he has grown his income exponentially. That's not a great example because he has a great business that's done really well. But the point of it was, he looked at this guy in front of all of us. He said, "You're ruined from investing." And he said to us, "Why do you think that is?" And we all said, "Because he's going to try to repeat that. Because he took a gamble and it ended up paying off." And that may not be true for that guy, but you don't want to look for home runs. You don't want to play the lottery. And that mentality will always end in you being broke. It just doesn't work over the long term. And so it really ends up being a process of learning to steward, grow your income, invest, and learning as you go that you have to commit to. You're not going to know everything up front. I mean, I'm still learning a ton right now at where I'm at. There's new levels that I have to deal with in estate planning and charitable trusts and taxation and creating LLCs. Like, someone at the base level where I was not too long ago, like, those aren't the conversations you're having. But as you enter into this process and you find people and resources, you're going to learn what you need at the time. And I think for people in the beginning, increasing their income, learning to stay out of debt, stay out of bad debt, and making smart investments like the S&P 500. You can do that on an E-Trade account on your phone, or you can get a financial planner to do it for you. I think tax-deferred opportunities like a 401k is phenomenal. A 401k is a way where you can not only invest your money, but you can lower your taxable income, because anything that you put into a 401k is going to come off the top line of your W-2. So you're going to pay less taxes. You're going to defer them till retirement.
Yep.
And so if you knock yourself down a tax bracket, I mean, you can save some serious money in your taxes while also building a retirement account and some pretty safe investments. So, I think for a single person, it's $20,000 a year. And for a married couple, it's around $40,000 a year that you can put into that. So, I think that really it's a process. You raise your income, you create a reserve of 6 months, so that you can pay for the AC when it goes out, and Christmas present, pay cash for that trip to Hawaii instead of a credit card, always trying to pay that back and keep that around 6 months. And then once you have that income every month, you start going into tax deferred things like a 401k. And what I'll tell you is I've taken a lot of people through this journey. Most people that start doing this, their income goes up, they start making more money, they start investing more money, and it's weird how it changes your mindset. You really start, the more you know, the more you do, the more you know, and it becomes a really fun thing to learn.
Yeah.
But you have to start right, in the beginning.
That's awesome. I like it. What do you feel like the biggest mistake people make along the way is?
I think that one of them was trying to hit home runs.
Yeah.
That's one that
I agree with that.
I made one a couple of years ago. So, I mean, you always have to pay attention to that. It's hard sometimes to follow the boring plan.
Yeah.
I think another one is trying to launch too soon.
Oh.
And what I mean by that is I was talking to this guy yesterday who has 3 companies. He's got a TV show. He's golfing with guys like Grant Cardone, working for Tony Robbins personally. And he's at a very high level right now. And he was teaching me some marketing stuff that actually I would love to share with you sometime about how he built some of his businesses on social media. But the one thing he said in the beginning of it that I thought was so good, he said, this isn't good for anyone that hasn't put 10,000 hours into a career with blinders on.
Yeah.
And committed to something and became excellent at it for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people who try to become the guru and sell courses or jump out of their lane 2, 3, 4 years in. And I think that it's the people that I know that are doing really well, like they became really good at one thing and grew their income in their lane and didn't try to become an entrepreneur with multiple companies until they were excellent and experts at one field.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important. You got to watch your debts. In 2008, there was a guy who had $15 million of real estate in Sacramento. He was killing it. He ended up filing bankruptcy because the tenants quit paying rent and he could no longer service the debt. And so this story was told to me by another guy I know who was from Redding, who now has $250 million in a private jet. And his point was real estate is good and people should buy real estate, but you should be diversified and you need to have some stocks. You need to have some, a 401k.
Don't put all your eggs in the basket.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. I guess that'd be a simple way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Diversify is another way to say that.
Yeah, I like that. It's interesting because a lot of what I do just in my real life, not BraveCo podcast life, but in my real life is help people build their marriages. I do that a lot. And so many marriages, when they come in, they're in a lot of pain, it's like normal. I mean, you go 5 or 10 years in a marriage, and if you don't have really great tools, and that's a lot of wear and tear, right? The 10 years of wear and tear, like we talked about the making amends earlier. Yeah. But to me, what happens is you give them a path, right? So you start to diagnose like, oh man, well, mostly what's going on in your marriage is you guys don't have great communication skills, right? So you give them some communication skills or you give them a resource. You're like, hey, go read whatever, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, or go read Boundaries, and that will help give you communication skills and needs and boundaries. And if you see couples over and over again, you start to notice that, man, it's easy to get inspired. It's hard to follow through, right, for them. And we're so prone to, and we do this too, right? Like you go work out, you have a hard workout, and the next morning you weigh yourself, you still weigh the same.
Yeah.
You go flex in the mirror, you still look the same.
Yeah.
You just feel sore. You just feel the pain. And so I think for me, being able to stick to the plan, like what is keeping you in the plan long enough that you could really see results. So I think one mistake people make is they measure too quick.
Yeah.
And
I do too.
If people would measure at the 6-month mark in their marriage, if they measure it in 6 months, okay, let's look back at where you've come. Like, it's fine to celebrate small success, but if you're asking yourself, am I going to stick to this plan? Am I going to follow through? You can't ask that question until 6 months, because if a married couple will give me 6 months of their time, effort, energy, and just do it, right? Bring the cheat sheet, because sometimes I'll literally give them a cheat sheet for communication. Bring it into your argument and follow it, right? I don't care how you feel. I don't care how mad you are. Follow it. And do your repair attempts afterwards, right? And just all the things that we've been teaching, because all you're trying to do is get 1% better.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
And if you get 1% better every fight or every communication or every day, if you just 1% this thing, dude, before you know it, you're like 6 months down the road and you have a completely different marriage. Mm-hmm. But it takes a long time to get those skills into you to actually execute. And I feel like finances is the same thing, which I'm just saying it in a different way, but trying to reiterate the point. Like, I think that anything we do in life, most often we measure too quick and then we get discouraged because we don't see the type of breakthrough that we want. I see it with people building their social media stuff is, man, they have great aspirations to really help people in my line of work. You know, they really want to help people. They want to do it on social media. Social media is a great platform to help people. Well, if you measure, even after 6 months, if you measure, you haven't built momentum.
Yep.
And momentum is such an important factor in anything in life, which is really what you're trying to get to. So I think that one of the best keys I can give people is just measure. Your measurement of success is 1% at a time. I'm working with this guy right now. He's probably the most depressed guy I've worked with in my career. At least one of them, and hopeless. Incredibly sweet man. I love him. I love him like my son. And he was in such a deep, dark hole when I started working with him. He's tried a whole bunch of stuff that I realized I have to help him move the goal from getting all the way well to getting 1% better, because he's in such a low spot that if we can just aim for 1%, which anybody can get 1%, not everyone can get 10%, but you can get 1% today. Yeah. Like 1% today is I made my bed. You can do that every day. Mm-hmm. I don't care how depressed you are. You can make your bed. 1% is I took a shower and brushed my teeth. Awesome. Okay, we're going to do 1% every single day. And then we're going to look back in 6 months and evaluate. But we're going to go through everything that we need to go through. And that's another thing that I think has helped him a lot is when you try a lot of things, you can tend to get more hopeless. Yep. But with him in counseling, I said, hey, let's look at everything as an opportunity. And we put a whole list of things that might work, things that might move the needle. So blood tests, meeting with a psychologist, vitamins, exercise. And we agreed to go through and check every box off. And if one didn't work, it didn't matter. All we're doing is narrowing in what helps them the most. It's a discovery journey. Yeah. And that really helped to change the mindset from like, oh, I'm trying all these things and nothing's working, to like, I'm discovering what really works for me.
There's a pattern interruption for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of stuff, you know, again, I'm not the money expert, but I think when we're trying to make a life shift, like what you're talking about, when we're trying to make a mindset shift and build momentum in the area, those things, being able to experiment, of course, not lose a bunch of money, but being able to check and see like, okay, what area am I good at? Or, oh, we're going to limit our budget here. And then I'm going to do a couple extra things and see what happens, and then reevaluate. Don't be afraid to try a couple things and give yourself a realistic amount of time before you find out, like, is this really working for me?
Yeah. There was a book I read a while back. I don't remember the name of it, but it was, this guy had coached a bunch of entrepreneurs and CEOs, and he noticed that there were a lot of these guys who were super defeated and depressed. And, you know, from the outside looking in, you would say, what are you stressed about. And so he discovered that one of their problems was their thinking. They were constantly falling short of their ideals.
Oh,
And so the book was about looking at what's in front of you. And he used this analogy of, when you're hiking through the mountains, if you are looking at the horizon, like, it's never ending. You're never going to get there. But if you're in a place hiking, and you and I have both hiked a lot,
yep.
if you try to enjoy the scenery around you and the step in front of you, and you're going to get where you want to be, and you're going to enjoy the process much more. And so a lot of the guys that I know that have navigated the journey of money, they have become lovers of the process and lovers of the grind. And what's really funny is most of the people that hit their goals, whether it's, $10 million and $50,000 a month in passive income or whatever the number is, what I have seen in most of them is they get to the top of the mountain and they realize it was never about the money. I just needed a mountain to climb. And the cool thing is that they wouldn't have been able to continue to figure out how to climb new mountains and find new mountains had they not accomplished financial independence. And so I think that in the beginning, the goal is I want to become financially independent. But as you start seeing the results of it, which take time as we're discovering, that this thing evolves into something that is so much better from my experience and from a lot of the guys I run with, where you become dangerous, man, because you can do anything you want to do. And you have now all these skills and wisdom that are so needed with the friends around you to share with them, because most people have money issues and they don't know someone to talk to. And so, yeah, I think the process and the grind, for me at this point, I like it more than the results.
Yeah. There's a quote that says, the guy who likes to run will always go further than the guy that wants the destination.
Totally.
And it's true. You just have to figure out, how do I like running? Yep. Create vision for it. Would you agree, and feel free to disagree, that the greatest secret to success in this area is find other guys who are doing better, wiser, going further, and insert yourself into their group? Like, do it with other. Do you think that that's
absolutely
okay?
Yeah, I would have never been sitting here today if it weren't for the people that have taken time to help me.
Yeah,
you can't do it without that. You can't. And I've and that's, I know that today more than I ever have before. And I fire myself. So when I cut a check to my financial planner, I don't tell him where to invest it anymore. I take my emotions out of it.
Wow.
I'm fired. I don't manage my money. I make it and I give it to the people that God has told me to give it to. And I let the results be what they are. And if you don't learn how to remove your emotions from money, that you'll really struggle, because the stock market doesn't just do this.
Right.
It does this, and it's not fun when it does this, but the long-term will help you understand that when it does this and you start getting into this journey, you're actually happy because it's discounted.
Yeah.
And you're not retiring tomorrow. So you have extra money, you buy more.
Yeah. And
so it ends up becoming a pretty fun game, but you have to learn how to remove your emotions from the process and look at it very tactically. And it's hard to do because it feels like it's this really important thing, but at the end of the day, it's going to work or it's not. And, I'm basing what I do based off 100 years of old gray-haired guys who have way more money than me, who have told me that you're wrong, son. This is how you do it. And I think that those age-old principles of dollar cost averaging, which means every month you're buying, whether the market's going up or down, you're not trying to time it right.
Wow.
Increasing your income and trying to do more and more as you can. It just works, as long as you follow a plan. So that would be the last thing I would say about it is recognizing where your emotions have harmed you in the past with money, and trying to make sure that you control them when you approach this. And you don't, hey, financial planner, I see the stock market's down today. Can you take all my money out? A good financial planner will say no. Even though it's your money, they will say, no, that's not the plan, Jason. You told me that this was a 30-year journey. I know it's down 10% today, but we're going to follow the plan. Right now, you're scared. I understand that. Hang up the phone. Go take some deep breaths. I got this.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Yeah.
Man, I So we always say, you know, you got to get in a group of guys. You got to run with guys who are smarter than you in different areas, you know, or who are at least, you know, willing to run and go places. And for me, that's been such a massive change over this past really 2 years of hanging out with guys like you. And we've got a whole bunch of other guys that we do the Foundations of Masculinity together, the 12-week course. We go on hunts together. We do a lot of this. You and I work out 3 or 4 days a week together. And we do a lot of just talking about, man, okay, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm building this thing, or my marriage is over here. And it's so helpful. I've just watched how that has impacted me over the past year in my life, or 2 years, just to start thinking more strategically, you know, and to start recognizing things that I wasn't recognizing before. But then also, to me, the other big piece is like, beyond the wisdom, it's, I know that you and all of our other friends you guys are grinding. You're making the right decision today. So it's like, dang, I got to make the right decision. Like, there's some real positive peer pressure. Yeah. And like, I know that, okay, I'm not going to get away with buying something, making an emotional purchase just because I feel low today. Yeah. You know, like, that's not going to fly. But I'm sticking to the plan, and even getting excited about having a vision and writing it down, and then setting some small goals to get to there. You and I talked about that a while ago. And I've talked to my wife about it. Like, okay, we need to actually map out, where do we want to end up, and then back it up, you know, a year. Okay.
Reverse engineer it.
Yeah. Start to reverse engineer, and just getting some small ideas but having other guys who are doing it and who have done it and who've taken that path is just so helpful. So to me, like, if you are in a spot where you're tight, where finances are tight, like, bring somebody into that. Don't just try to solve it yourself. Bring somebody in, and to the best of your ability, get around guys who are, you know, going in the same direction. And man, if you can get with guys who have gone further than you, that's even better. Chris, do you have a couple books that you've read over the past that you like, that have helped you?
Yeah. I think one I refer out a lot is The Millionaire Next Door. Okay. Which is a story of a UPS driver who became a multimillionaire doing the very thing I just said, you know, dollar cost averaging. And the point of that book is that you don't have to become a rich person to become rich. You have to steward well, right? I think that Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is probably one of the best books anyone could read. This one really deals with the mindset, and it helps you think the way that rich people think. Because at the end of the day, that's one of the best things people get through the journey of wealth creation, is they learn how to think differently about things. They truly have the anything is possible mentality in a way that I don't see a lot of people have because of the journey that they've gone through. And then the last one I would say, a classic one, would be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, it's a very similar concept to The Millionaire Next Door, but he talks a lot about, he gets more into tactics in that book. And it's a great book that I would say almost every person I know that has made money and stewarded it has read that book.
That's cool. Yeah. One thing I love that you're doing is you have a podcast, The Money Hole, right? And you go over tactics and go deeper in and bring on guests that it's just awesome. So I'd encourage all you guys to head over there. We'll put the link in the description. But Chris, thank you so much, man, for coming in, opening up, sharing your wisdom, being vulnerable with us, sharing your past. You're such an incredible example of what God can do and what people can do if they own their past and put their time, effort, and energy. Like, you've built an incredible family, a really incredible marriage, and you've set yourself up financially in a way that will just be such a blessing to your kids and in your family. So I really love that about you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
It.
All right, BraveCo men, have an incredible week. We will see you next week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.